It was the kind of night where the stars seemed to disappear into a black abyss, swallowed up by an endless stretch of road. The kind of night where even the wind felt too still, as if the world had come to a halt. That's how Billy Reynolds felt when he glanced out the windshield of his rig, heading west along the US 60 highway, far from any town or light. Billy had been driving for hours, and the road ahead seemed to stretch on forever. A long-haul trucker for nearly 2 decades, he had seen the worst the roads could throw at him: hailstorms, icy patches, and even the occasional drunk driver. He knew how to handle any obstacle, but tonight felt different. His eyes were heavy, the fatigue from the long hours behind the wheel starting to catch up with him. He rubbed his eyes, trying to shake off the sleepiness, but it was no use. The dark road, illuminated only by the dim headlights of his semi, seemed to be pulling him in, tempting him to let his guard down just for a moment. Billy had heard about this stretch of the highway before, how drivers claimed to hear strange noises or see things out of the corner of their eyes on this lonely road. He scoffed at the rumors. Ghost stories for the backwoods, he muttered to himself, tapping the CB radio and flipping through static-filled channels. Just then, a message crackled through the radio. "You hear about in the hollow?" Billy glanced down at the radio. It was hard to make out the voice through the static, but the word hollow caught his attention. He'd heard enough stories about that stretch of road. Some truckers would whisper about it, claiming that once you drove into the hollow, you never came back. Others said they'd heard whispers on the wind or seen figures walking the roadside. He shook his head. "Come on, man, just the fatigue getting to you," Billy said aloud to no one. He reached for his thermos and took a long sip of coffee, the bitter liquid burning his throat as he tried to stay awake. A low groan from the engine brought him back to reality. Billy's heart skipped a beat. The rig stuttered and then stalled out. His stomach dropped as the truck coasted to a halt, the engine dying with a quiet sputter. He slammed his fists against the steering wheel in frustration. "Damn it, not now." Billy took a deep breath, gripping the wheel tightly. He looked around, trying to calm himself. He was stranded in the middle of nowhere. The road was dead quiet except for the low hum of the wind. The rig's headlights barely cut through the darkness, casting long, eerie shadows across the highway. He grabbed his toolbox from the passenger seat and got out of the truck. The air was thick and cold, biting at his skin. He popped open the hood, but before he could even take a look at the engine, something caught his eye. A figure stood in the distance, half hidden by the trees. Billy froze. His heart pounded in his chest. The figure wasn't moving, just standing there in the shadows, almost blending into the trees, but he could see the outline of a man. A tall man, but with a strange, distorted shape, almost like he was bent forward unnaturally. Billy's gut instinct told him to get back in the truck, lock the doors, and drive the hell out of there, but his legs felt frozen like they were glued to the asphalt. The figure remained still, not moving, and then, without any warning, it took a step toward him. Billy's blood ran cold. He backed away slowly, his hand shaking as he fumbled for his phone. The signal was dead, nothing but a blank screen. He could hear his breath ragged in his ears, and for a moment, it felt like the world was pressing in on him. He slammed the hood closed, not taking his eyes off the figure, and slid back into the cab. His hands trembled as he reached for the key, turning the ignition. The truck sputtered, nothing. He tried again, still nothing. The figure took another step, moving closer. Billy's mind raced, and his pulse thundered in his ears. It was almost as if the man was drawn to him. The shape seemed to grow, towering over the road, and for the first time in years, Billy felt real, palpable fear. Suddenly, the figure moved faster, taking long, unnatural strides, and Billy could see it clearly now. Its face pale, distorted in the dark, its limbs unnaturally long, as if they didn't belong to a normal human. He threw the truck into gear and gunned the engine. The wheels screeched as he tore down the highway, headlights cutting through the darkness. The figure appeared in the rearview mirror, running at an impossibly fast speed, keeping pace with the truck. Billy pushed the accelerator harder, his heart pounding as the truck roared down the road. The figure started to blur, moving faster than anything humanly possible. He tried to reason with himself. It's just my mind playing tricks. Just a hallucination. But when he glanced back into the mirror, the figure was closer, now a silhouette standing at the edge of the road, its form grotesquely hunched, and its face twisted into an inhuman snarl. Billy could barely see the road ahead, his vision clouded by panic. He swerved the truck, barely missing the guardrails as he drove faster, the engine screaming as it strained under the pressure. He didn't stop to think. He couldn't stop, not with that thing still chasing him. Suddenly, the road began to narrow. He was entering the hollow. Billy's hands gripped the steering wheel tighter. The trees on either side of the road seemed to close in, their black branches reaching down as if they wanted to pull him into the woods. The headlights flickered as he tore through the forest, the trees blurring around him. He glanced in the rearview mirror again, expecting to see the figure gaining on him, but there was nothing. Nothing but the dark road. Billy thought he was free. He took a deep breath, trying to calm his racing heart. The hollow stretched out behind him, a dense, eerie void. He thought maybe he had left whatever that thing was behind. But then something changed. The headlights illuminated something ahead, something standing in the middle of the road. A woman. She was tall and thin, with wild hair, wearing a tattered white dress that billowed in the wind. Her eyes were hollow, as if she had been staring into the abyss for years. Her face was pale, almost ghostly, and her lips stretched into a twisted grin as she looked straight at the truck. Billy slammed on the brakes, the truck screeching to a halt just inches from the woman. He stared at her, his breath caught in his throat. He could feel the cold sweat forming on his brow, his hands shaking as he gripped the wheel. The woman began to move. Her body twisted unnaturally, jerking in ways that didn't seem human, as she crawled toward the truck. Her limbs were too long, too wrong, and as she got closer, Billy could see the strange black veins crawling beneath her skin, pulsating with each movement. Billy was frozen in terror, unable to move, unable to breathe. She was right in front of him now, her face pressed against the window, eyes locked with his. Her grin was wide, impossibly wide, stretching across her face until her skin cracked. Suddenly, she opened her mouth, her voice a low, guttural whisper that seemed to come from every direction at once. "You shouldn't have come here. Now you can't leave." Billy's heart pounded in his chest as he slammed the truck into reverse, the tires spinning as he tore backward, not looking behind him as he fought to escape. The engine roared to life again, but it wasn't long before it sputtered and died once more. Number Billy cursed and kicked the dashboard, adrenaline surging through him. The cold, oppressive darkness of the hollow seemed to close in, the trees pressing in on all sides, and the woman was still there, standing just beyond the reach of the headlights, smiling like she knew something he didn't. He turned the key once more, and this time, the truck rumbled to life. "Not again, not again," Billy muttered to himself, tearing down the road at breakneck speed, eyes wild as he glanced in the rearview mirror. But something wasn't right. The road stretched out before him, the trees still looming on either side. But in the rearview mirror there was no hollow, no road, no trees, just a black void. And standing in the middle of it, watching him, was the woman. Billy's mind was racing, his vision blurring. He hit the brakes, but it was too late. The road was gone. There was nothing but the void.